Coming up on Over a Barrel, gas prices are falling, but will that continue? Plus, we've got a lot to talk about with regard to what may be the final presidential debate that's taken place this week. We've got all kinds of analysts for that, maybe even a hurricane or two that might be brewing once again out in the Atlantic. So much more as well, right here on Over a Barrel, which starts right now. Welcome to the program on Over a Barrel. I'm Matt McClain. He's Patrick DeHaan. And guess what? We've had a very busy week. I am jet lagged, or he's jet lagged, or we both are. I'm not even really sure.
I'm hoping we don't burst into laughter again because we are very tired. And I was up at 4 a.m. this morning and whew, all right. This is one of a few takes because the laughter apparently was contagious. I don't know why we were laughing, but it's good news, right?
A little bit of coffee can fix everything, right?
That's
a little
right.
bit of coffee fixes it.
Well, let's dive right into it, Matt. Let's not hold back from the folks here. It's been a great week since we last did a podcast. Gas prices have kept declining. We're down another 7 cents a gallon in the last week, and you were telling me you got some really cheap gas.
I paid. I'm leaning close to the microphone. I paid $2.34 per gallon. I was in Mississippi. I was in Biloxi, Ocean Springs, Mississippi, and I paid $2.34 a gallon, and I was on cloud nine. Let me tell you, I was so happy I couldn't even begin. And then I had to evacuate because of Francine. But that's a whole other issue as well. I had a video job down there, a video project, and we crammed 2 days worth of work into one, and then had to get out of Dodge really quick. And then it chased me all the way back to Paducah. And guess what? The remnants of Francine are
is just
over my head
you.
again. So
thank you for not coming further north because I will point out it is sunny in Chicago. So keep it down there.
It is not here. It is most definitely not sunny here.
We'll keep the high gas prices. You keep Francine. Deal?
You know what? Deal, because I go through a lot of gas. No problem. I'll take you on that deal.
Well, speaking of deals, 15 states now, Matt. Just pulled up the graphic here before we started recording. 15 states. Let's see. Is Wisconsin there? Oh, they're on the cusp. That's a hanging chad waiting to fall out. Wisconsin, look at that. 3,001 a gallon. But there's 14 other states, and by the way, there's also almost 60,000 gas stations below the $3 a gallon mark. Let us know in the comments, what are you paying and where are you located? Would love to know. There's a lot of folks, by the way. I like to your point, 234. There's a couple of those stations in like Louisiana and Mississippi. As I quickly pull up to see what Louisiana is here. Look at this, my goodness gracious, 237 in Baton Rouge, of course. By the way, as we're talking about Baton Rouge, an area that was battered by Francine, no real impacts, Matt, from that storm. So certainly a thumbs up that Francine really, now there were some shutdowns. It really impacted oil production on some of those major rigs and platforms out in the Gulf of Mexico. A lot of those were evacuated as a precaution. Refineries, there were a couple refineries, by the way, that Francine went right over, but thankfully it was only a kind of a low-level Category 1 storm.
Right. So hopefully little, if any, damage. That's the hope.
Yeah, exactly. So, by and large, it's been pretty good news. Look at that, 237 as of a couple of minutes ago. But
see what I'm saying? I was so happy I wanted to fill up twice.
Yeah, absolutely. It's gotten a lot better. So we'll take it. And by the way, stick to the later part of this. If you want to listen for what's coming next, we'll enlighten you, but we just kind of want to highlight where we are right now. And that is where we are right now, Matt. The national average is probably going to fall below the 320 gallon mark here later today. So look at all the blue here. For those listening, you can watch us also on YouTube. What we're looking at right now is just all the metrics down from yesterday, down from last week, down from last month, down from last year. And that 320 is probably going to be starting with a 2 maybe by October.
You can't get there quickly enough for me. I'm hoping for $1.99 a gallon, and 234 wasn't far from it. Let me tell you, I seriously did a triple take and was like 234. Wait, what? And I immediately, safely turn signal on, but immediately got in line to get the gas because I'm going that I have. I mean, every
Apparently
place
that
else-
popular, that station was so popular, there was a line.
There was, and I've sent you pictures before in Lexington, Kentucky, on my way.
Did you
to
see people
Washington,
taking
DC.
pictures of the pump sign?
I did, and
Was
I
it
also
you?
It was not me. I did not do
Aw.
that one this time. I did for the one at the station there in Lexington because there were 60 cars in line because I wanted to save 20 cents a gallon, and so
That
did
sounds like
everybody
going to
else.
a Buc-ee's. You know, they've got like
Right.
7,000 pumps, and they're all magically. I don't know. You know, they're all busy. Always a great place to stop, though. I love stopping at the big
I
stop like Buc-ee's, and it's
drove
always
by-
cheap gas.
I drove by maybe 4 of those on my way back from point A to point B yesterday. So yes, I wanted to stop at one, but wanted to get back here faster. So I knew it was going to be an experience and decided.
Yeah, you know, that can happen.
Yep, I decided that the brisket could wait till the next trip, for sure, because I've heard very good things about it. I think you're the one who told me the brisket was amazing.
Oh my goodness, you know, the brisket, the pulled pork, you know, let's not get ahead of ourselves. You know, it's so delicious, but you know, speaking of stops for gas, let's cover the price of oil, by the way, Matt, which
Can we please? Yes.
yeah, you know, taking a look at the wild roller coaster ride. By the way, this is looking at basically the year-to-date view. And if you've noticed here, if we zoom in, $69 is where we're at. Although earlier this week we're down to $66. That was magical, by the way. Zooming out here, yeah, we are at the lowest point now. We were at the lowest point. Look at this, all the way since. I'm gonna have to readjust this. Yeah, look at that, all the way since basically 2021, since oil has been this low. And by the way, that's part of the reason why gas prices have declined so much. So, you know, I gotta love it.
I'm not complaining in the least. I really, genuinely want prices to even go a little bit lower if we could work that into the magic somehow. I will not complain at all.
We'll get out the magic wand, and you know, we'll make it happen. I think
You're Patrick DeHaan, you can do this, right?
Oh boy, if
You can do
only I
this.
could, it would be this way. Yeah, I'd be waving the wand for $1.99. Skip $2.99.
Absolutely. You know, so there's a lot of stuff out there. Obviously, gas prices are continuing to fall. So thankful about that. We have been watching the tropics, understandably. Francine chased me all the way back here to the upper South and Midwest, where it's having an impact as of the time of the recording now with a lot of much needed rain, because if you've not seen the Mississippi River lately, it looks more like a small stream. The barge companies and stuff are having great difficulty in navigating what's left of the river. So every aspect of this rain is definitely needed, and we are very thankful for it. But the tropics are not done yet. We are looking at some stuff out in the Atlantic. I know that there has been a tropical storm that I believe has formed, but it doesn't look like, Gordon, I'm going to say that's a storm for the fishes. I really do. What that basically means, when I did broadcasting in Florida, we all knew what that meant, is that it's going to turn, exactly, it's going to turn and never be an issue for land right there in the next 5 days. And so that's certainly good news for those of us land dwellers, if you will, here on this part of the world. And there's some other disturbances. One thing that they're watching, obviously, is off the coast of the Carolinas. A little bit of like a 10 or 15%, but that thing, that right there, that little blob off the Carolinas and the coast of Georgia, Francine is actually tapping some of that moisture, and she is expected to stay exactly where she is at for the next several days. So hopefully we'll get some rain, but nothing major to write home about. And Gordon looks like he's not going to be an impact
I love
either.
this. I love Weatherman Matt is just giving us a complete update on the tropics.
I mean, it's kind of part of my experiences there, a little bit of wisdom and knowledge, and of course, you also, as you well know, if you're any kind of a pilot, you also have to learn all of this stuff to be able to fly in the atmosphere. So all of this stuff is quite familiar to me. So it looks like we're basically, for the moment, fingers crossed, nothing major to write home about. But that doesn't mean there's not stuff out there that could potentially impact gas prices, because we're watching different things like, a presidential debate.
Oh man, whew.
Which may have been for the strangest presidential election of my lifetime and your lifetime and pretty much everybody else's lifetime. We had, one candidate drop out, and then the vice president taking that slot. And so we've had two debates.
It's been a really weird election cycle.
It's been a
by
very
the way.
strange election
There's
cycle.
A lot of weird things happening.
Very much
A
so.
lot of different headlines, coming out of this. A lot of different finger pointing that is just really interesting. Speaking of knowledge, by the way, about hurricane season, since we still have the graphic pulled up there.
Yep.
I was reading that this is the first year since 1997 that there were only, I think, two named storms during the month of August. And they've been, if anyone hasn't been keeping track, it's
rare.
been eerily quiet over the last month. But they were talking about how the tropical wave has been more northerly this year in Africa. So it's been, these storms have not been produced because the desert's very dry, and it's going over an area then of the Atlantic that has been, what did they say, very warm aloft, which then kills a lot of the development. And now they're talking about that trend line moving south, which would be more conducive for more activity. So, that is one of the things, though. We're talking about how great it is of gas prices potentially dropping below the $3 a gallon mark, but we're still keeping an eye on the Atlantic. So, to Matt's point, it's not over till it's over. Hurricane season goes through the end of November.
We're in the height. September is the height of the hurricane season.
Like literally, like right now is the peak, and as you can see, there's a lot. There's definitely some things happening. So,
which generally speaking, you want this, right? And the reason why you want what you see on the map right now is because it actually takes the heat and the buildup of heat along the equator and actually disperses it further north. It's a part of the process of Mother Earth. That's kind of what you want. Otherwise, you would have a very serious imbalance all across the globe, and you don't want that. So this is a normal thing. You kind of want this. You just hope that it doesn't damage anything in the process.
Exactly. And speaking about the peak of hurricane season, which is mid-September, another thing happens in mid-September, Matt. This is something that we get asked about on a regular basis, and that's that we are on the cusp of making the change back to cheaper winter gasoline, which is, another thing that typically will help lower prices.
So do you think that $2.34 a gallon could drop even more?
Yeah, I do. Absolutely. And it's going to be helped by summer gasoline. We'll pull up a graphic here for those that are watching this on YouTube. If you're not, you can feel free to tune in. This is the EIA's website. But essentially, as we've mentioned, refineries, here are the dates, May 1 through September 15th. And September 15th is just a couple days away. So as soon as that lapses, as soon as September 15th is over, the EPA does not mandate these stringent blends. And that means, and you can see here, by the way, look at the butane, the EIA suggesting that there's only 2% butane in summer gasoline. Butane is plentiful, it's cheap. And by the way, summer gasoline has way more alkylate, and alkylate is very expensive. So that's what boosts your price. Alkylate is exactly what raises the octane of gasoline. So the difference between regular gasoline, and we talked to George Hoekstra a few episodes ago about the chemical view of this. But essentially that alkylate's more expensive. When we get to winter, that alkylate gets reduced and the butane count can go back up, and that butane's a lot cheaper. So when you make that transition, you generally always, it's quite a bit cheaper. Winter gasoline is. The exception, though, Matt, to this one rule is California. California changes later than everyone else. And if I look for that, I'm going to quick try and pull up a graphic for those in California. See if I can find it. California changes later in September for some of the less populated areas. And like areas like Southern California doesn't make the switch over until Halloween. Or I should say after Halloween. So November 1st is when they can start switching over. So,
well, this is music to my ears. This past month, I've had a record as far as the amount of miles. Guess how many miles I've driven? Driven, not flown, driven over the past 30 days.
Way too many. And by the way, I did quickly pull this map up for those that want to know. Look, and this is, by the way, this is the complexity too, Matt. When we say refineries go down, look at these 5 areas that have different dates.
Well, that's very unique.
So when a refinery goes down, it becomes very challenging to be like, okay, look at Area A, Area B, Area C, Area D, and E. They all generally had different change dates. And like I was saying, October 31st, they have to use those blends through October 31st in Southern California. Northern California, generally through the end of September. Although if you're in an area like the Bay Area and the Central Valley, they also look at this, right? They had to say through October 30, and Southern California is through October 31. It's like,
Why?
guys, why don't we just align on the same dates? So,
Why is that?
California's goofy. I mean, really, Matt, why would you pick two different dates in October? Why wouldn't you just say October 30, everyone, or October 31st? So,
what's one day, right?
Exactly.
That sounds a little
essentially, by the way, and I'll pull up one more graphic. The biggest price improvements is going to be for these areas. These are the areas that require the more stringent blends of gasoline in the summer.
Which areas?
I'm calling it the non-gray areas. So I'll go through it. Some of the largest cities, Matt, have to use these stringent blend during the summer months. So areas like the Chicagoland metro area, St. Louis, the entire northeastern seaboard, the East Coast, areas of basically. Texas. Yeah. So it's, if you're watching online, it's these areas that you see in green or gold that generally get the biggest cost benefit when we switch back to cheaper winter gasoline.
Yeah, I'm really surprised that more of Florida is not under, I don't even think...
don't worry. If they become an attainment area, which EPA monitors air pollution, there's a possibility that could happen down the road. For example, this year, Denver just hit that attainment mark, and this was the first year that Denver also had to use reformulated gasoline. Now, thankfully, it didn't really affect them in a significantly negative way, but Florida would maybe be a little bit different.
I'm thoroughly surprised at the I-4 corridor, Tampa, Orlando area. I think I saw in that map just a little area around the Tampa metro, but it did not extend out into Orlando. And with the tourism base and everything, I'm really surprised, actually.
Well, the Miami area, bigger enough. So, look for that to potentially change in the years ahead, because this is something that's being constantly monitored. So, but the good news, Matt, is all these pressures, the switch over to cheaper winter gasoline, that's downward pressure. It's going to be a lovely weekend here in Chicago, but people still are not driving as much. They're not RVing as much. Road trips, summer driving season is over. Demand for gasoline is lower. It's also being enhanced by a slowdown in the economy that we're seeing. So demand is also adding downward pressure. The switch to winter gasoline is adding downward pressure. And we looked earlier, the price of oil is adding downward pressure. So we have a lot of downward pressure on gas prices right now. And the national average at $3.20 a gallon, it's likely just going to be a matter of time, Matt, before this falls below $3. So, and by the way, maybe by Halloween, let's go through the list here. Wisconsin's still teetering on the sub $3 a gallon average. Most of these states, in fact, Matt, all 25 of these states that we see here, even the ones that aren't under $3, it could happen in the next 2 weeks that we see 25 of the nation's 50 states be below $3 a gallon. So that certainly would be incredible. And it's still September. Usually, like last year, it probably took until mid to late October for us to get to this mark. And by the way, I know it's an election year. Gas prices went down last year in the fall as well. So, and they went down 2022 in the fall as well. Those were in election years. So I keep getting the myth. People in my timeline on X, Gas Buddy guy, love to say, "Oh, isn't this a coincidence? It's an election." No, it's not a coincidence. It's seasonal, guys. Let's look for a better answer than, "Oh, it might blah blah blah."
I've created a new nickname for you. I'm calling you Patrick the Mythbuster.
I don't know if I'm deserving of that title. Patrick the Impatient Mythbuster, maybe.
I think it's fun.
Until I'm blue in the face. These myths will be perpetuated for the rest of my life. But I guess that's maybe some level of
we definitely seem to be running into, over the past 5 to 10 years, a lot more, I would think, where you're almost playing whack-a-mole. Versus when you first got into this industry, 2008, 2009, things have progressed in a very unusual manner, because I do notice, even in a lot of your interviews, you are playing more of a whack-a-mole situation. Like, no, that's a myth. No, that's a myth. No, that's wrong.
There's no shortage of them, right?
But yeah, the question mark that I have in my mind is, how did we get there? to where there's so much of a stuff like this with crude oil and gas prices and whatnot. It's almost like a football that nobody wants to hold, and people are tossing things back and forth.
It's certainly probably amplified by social media. Somebody thinks that they've come up with something that in their head makes sense. They share it, and other people are like, "Oh, that makes sense to me too." But that doesn't mean it's reality, right? I think social media has let everyone know that they can put their opinion out there, but it doesn't mean that what you're seeing is correct, right? Yeah. Which is why, we have thankfully a lot of listeners, a lot of loyal listeners, and we appreciate them that do like to actually, get this level of breakdown. Whereas a lot of people just, instead of doing the research or caring or wanting to know information, they may just share something that they think sounds right. And, that is the kind of the era that we're in is there's a lot of information out there, but there's also a lot of myths and misinformation out there. So it always gets shared though. It's almost easier. There's more people saying what's wrong than there are petroleum analysts to correct that. I almost feel like at Thanksgiving, how Butterball has like a turkey hotline on how to cook. Maybe we should come up with because there's a lot of these arguments that I hear about that happen on Thanksgiving in the US, right? When your Uncle Joe or Uncle Bill or whatever, you start talking about gas prices and, pointing fingers.
Everyone's got such a strong opinion, no matter
if it's right or wrong. Is it rooted in fact or is it rooted in opinion? I mean,
it's the digging in of the heels, so to speak, as the old saying goes, where I'm originally from near the Ozarks, right? You dig in your heels and it's like, I'm not budging on my opinion. And it doesn't matter if it's right, wrong, or sideways, or factual or not. And I'm not trying to offend or say anything to anybody. I'm saying this is a very, very broad.
You're offending me.
Yeah, I'm a broad brush basis of how I'm trying to paint that, because everyone seems to know what's going on in their own minds. And sometimes not everybody's going to be right. And that's irrespective of your particular opinion on any one situation. That's just a broad brush situation. Speaking of the presidential debate, we've got promises being made on both sides of the political spectrum. And those promises deal with a lot of the crude oil aspects, drill, baby, drill, fracking. Yeah. You've got so many back and forths on that. Can we kind of do a little bit of a breakdown on some of these things and kind of see where your opinion is on them? There's a lot there to
there digest. Really is. And it did come up a few times in the debate, although it seemed like there were a lot of other things that came up a little bit more than energy, but energy did get a spotlight, for the drill baby drill, which has been Trump's mantra. Harris, who previously, before she was Biden's running mate, was anti-fracking, right? When she was in California Attorney General, her stance, and when she was being vetted, there's a lot of interviews that she did that she was very much anti-fracking and would end it. She has changed her stance. Just like you and I, we don't know if she's serious about that. But I would say she can't really be serious about it because, number one, Matt, the federal government can only control what happens on the federal government's land. And fracking, which is hydraulic fracturing, by the way, somebody say fracking is an incorrect term. So it's not necessarily incorrect. That's the term that we have abbreviated, hydraulic fracturing. Generally, the Fed can only control what's happening on Fed's lands, right? That's the thing is when you hear that the Fed, that the president is killing permits, that's only happening on federal land. The federal government only has control of what happens on federal land. That's the beauty of the U.S. is it's my land and I can allow drilling on it if I want.
Can you though? I'm not trying to question your authority on this, but I'm actually asking, don't you have to get some kind of a permit to begin drilling for oil?
You probably have to get a permit, but it's focused on the environmental aspect of it, right? And that's where the EPA could technically throw some legal challenges in the way. But I would point out that even though...
Or a state, a county, or a city.
Correct. There's a lot of different jurisdictions that could potentially, right? But if you're in Texas, right, most of the entities aren't going to get in your way.
Yeah, they're going to actually probably roll out the red carpet. And the same in Oklahoma, because it is such a large contribution to the
Fed.
economy.
Ultimately, there'd be a lot of court challenges, right, over any attempt. But I think if I'm analyzing the situation, right, we did see the Biden-Harris administration start coming in to the White House and championing anti-oil moves like ending the Keystone XL pipeline, which is not really a big deal. We've talked about that before because now the Trans Mountain pipeline has been built. But she's backed off, and I think they've learned some lessons. I think both the Biden administration learned lessons. We've seen some of these policies that they came in hot and heavy for. They've now kind of backed off of that because the Russian invasion of Ukraine, when oil prices went through the roof, politicians are seeing that Americans really don't like stances that can potentially help drive prices up. So that's where some of this, and that's where some of the discussion on the debate was really interesting because Harris has walked back, right? She now says, I'm for fracking. She signed the Inflation Reduction Act, which in the act that had some approval for leases to drill oil. So to that point, she has had some concrete actions that have gone against her initial stance. And she specifically says, Harris, quote, my values haven't changed. I have not banned and will not ban fracking, end quote. And she also said, quote, we cannot over-rely on foreign oil, end quote. So I think that's pretty clear in about face.
Do you think that the oil markets received that information well, that regardless of who is going to be placed into the White House courtesy of an election in November, that things might be somewhat stable over the next 4 years as a point to make anyway, that no matter who wins, things are not going to be horrible in the crude oil space? Yes? No?
Correct. I mean, the industry has been very taking a more cautious approach, right? Because of the pain that they sustained during COVID. And because they know that OPEC can very quickly raise output. And that's why it's taken 3 years for the U.S. to get back to record-setting oil production. It's not because of anything the Biden administration did. It's simply because oil executives don't want to flood the market with cheap oil. They learned their lesson. And so they've been taking a much more calculated approach at restoring oil production. That's why they're not also racing to drill more oil. And even if President Trump wins the election, even if he cuts through the red tape, oil companies are still not going to rush to produce more oil. Why? Because they sell oil. Oil companies drill for and sell oil. If there's more oil production, if there's more supply, that's going to push prices down. And then oil companies are going to cut production, right? If prices go too low, they cut production, just as they did during COVID, right? When oil prices went negative, oil production fell from 13 million barrels to 10 million barrels. And it's only because oil prices started going back up as the economy reopened that oil companies started to drill more. So to your point, oil prices are going to move regardless of what politicians are saying because oil prices are a much larger global market than just one U.S. politician. So the other thing that caught my eye too, and Trump has been, and both administrations have talked about tariffs. Mm-hmm. The one thing that Trump has suggested that's a bit worrisome is he said, quote, we're going to do tariffs on other countries, end quote. There wasn't a whole lot of specificity. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tripping over my words. So he had said that. And now keep in mind that Canada is the number one source of imported oil to the United States. So and some people said, well, Trump didn't specifically say he'd tariff oil. Well, no, he issued a general statement. He also didn't issue any carve-outs. He didn't say we won't tariff Canada, right? He didn't say that. He could have. So that's something to keep an eye on. Do I think he's going to tariff Canadian oil? I don't know.
I would think that he would. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I would think that area.
I think there'd be a lot of noise if he did that
in his own party.
But there've been a lot of noise from his own party on broader tariffs as well, because tariffs are essentially a tax, and Republicans are generally anti-tax, right? One moment he's talking about tax cuts, and the other he's talking about tariffs, which, to his point, that yields a lot of revenue for the U.S. But who pays that? When prices go up, it's consumers that continue to buy those tariffed items that are paying the higher price.
It's a very unique dynamic that we find ourselves in because you have the side of the political spectrum that normally is more into renewable energy, wanting to say, we're not going to block fracking, we're not going to do this. We understand its importance. We don't need to rely on foreign oil.
Right.
And then you have the other political spectrum that is normally a drill baby drill mindset, saying, well, there may be tariffs. I am not. Listen, it's very rare that I become speechless. I've made a living out of talking. That's a big one for me. I'm trying to mentally put my mind around that, wrap my mind around that, and go, what just happened? I mean, like, what's going on here?
There's a lot to chew off. Ultimately, Matt, I'd have to say that I don't think. I mean, we're currently with Democrats in the White House. I would have to think, based on what the lessons that have been learned thus far, Democrats are not going to be in a race to create or to lend credibility to the future of oil prices being higher, right? Because they know Americans were incredibly pained the last few years. So I really think the status quo will continue under the Harris administration if that's who the Americans elect. I also think that if Trump is elected, there probably will be an environment where it's easier for oil companies to drill for oil. I don't think that is going to have a cost benefit, though, right? Because you can make it easier for somebody to do something. That doesn't mean they're going to do it.
Right.
And so
you can maybe try to twist an arm or two, so to speak.
Right. You can ease other regulations too.
Right.
I think back during Trump's days in the White House, he made no secret that he wanted to do things like get rid of the EPA. Right. He wanted to cut regulation. He still wants to cut regulation. If he cuts a lot of regulation, that could have a downward impact on gas prices. But right, if he eases the regulations on winter and summer gasoline, the counter to that is if you ease the summer gasoline requirement for gasoline, for example, you're going to have a lot more air pollution. So, right, you can do things, but it doesn't mean it's smart, because for every action there is a reaction.
It's a cause and effect kind of world, no question about it. So that is certainly something.
It's going to be really interesting. I mean, here's the thing, Matt. No matter who's elected, gas prices are going to keep going down into probably November, December. That's usually when prices bottom out. And I've said, doesn't matter who gets elected, gas prices are going to go right back up next spring, probably starting in mid to late February. So, we are seeing gas prices plummet. That's probably good news for the incumbent, right? Because when prices go down, when gas prices are not as annoying as they've been, people don't have such a visceral reaction to want to throw out the president or the administration or the party who's been in the White House this whole time. So it's going to be really interesting. I ultimately don't think that there's going to be a whole lot of needle moving on energy either way, no matter who's elected. I just don't see any. The one thing like I said, Trump and his tariffs, I wouldn't think he'd put tariffs on Canadian oil, but he also has not specifically given a carve out for that. So keep an eye on that. While we stand here, let's do a quick needle check. Gas prices, U.S. oil production is at record levels. U.S. natural gas production is at record levels. And that's not because of a president or politician. They don't get credit for that.
Yeah, and an image just came onto the screen that was a touch early. Apologies for that while you were still talking. So there's really no easy way to segue. Let's just jolt right on.
And by the way, this issue now that you're mentioning, there is, Trump has been pretty insistent that, day one and if he's elected day one, this war is going to be over. Now, that's a pretty big boast, or that's a pretty big feat to accomplish, because I mean, the headline here, Russia will be at war with NATO if Ukraine long-range missiles restrictions lifted. And during the debate, Trump, I believe he said, day one, Russia-Ukraine war is over. And then Harris pushed back and said, well, what are you going to do? Exactly. Give all the land that Russia's captured to Russia? Because I don't think it's that easy. I don't think there's going to be much room for negotiation. Ukraine's going to want its land back, and Russia's not going to want to give it up. And I don't think Trump is going to solve that.
So the main reason for that, and again, that image just sort of popped up before it was. I was expecting it to. I was preloading, and thanks to how it works, there it was. But President Biden, the one currently sitting in the office, is contemplating allowing U.S.-made weaponry to be deployed and used much deeper into Russia, and that is why President Putin is making those particular comments. Geopolitically speaking, that's a heck of a statement. And if you do allow U.S. missiles and other aspects to basically
that could incite a retaliatory,
right, which
attack
Ukraine has already launched their own homemade weapons into Moscow. A U.S. missile going into something like a Moscow situation, you would almost think that they wouldn't have a choice, Russia, but yet to...
Well, Russia...
You know what I'm saying?
Russia is kind of backed into this. I mean, they promise retaliation if they allow that, but what are they going to do? Russia's hamstrung with this war in Ukraine, right? They're battling fronts already with Ukraine. If they really want to provoke the U.S., they are going to be vastly overmatched.
Or NATO, for that matter.
Right. Russia's talking about biting off a whole lot more than it can chew, I think, in this instance. But, where this comes in with the debate and the presidential candidates is, can Trump actually do anything about this? That's going to be neutral. But for now, Russia, this issue, Ukraine continues to launch drones into Russia, which is something that we continue to monitor. For now, it hasn't really impacted the price of oil. I think there's a lot of economic duress happening in China. That's reducing demand there. Our economy has slowed down significantly, and a lot of that is why gas prices suddenly are declining so much. It's, summer, demand was higher, and now we're just getting the seasonality. And, for now, Matt, we can wrap it up by that, and that's where we're going.
Yep.
If gas prices will continue dropping, we're going to see more states fall below $3. We're going to see a lot more gas stations below $3.
I've certainly put a lot of crude oil that's been refined through my tank over the past month, almost 7,000 miles behind the wheel.
Ooh, that's a lot of gallons. And speaking of refined, one quick note to be aware of, this is also the time of year that refineries do start doing their maintenance. So maintenance may be a subject that we talk a little bit about. My favorite refinery here, the refinery in Northwest Indiana, is starting maintenance here in just about 10 days. So planned maintenance is a lot different than unexpected outages. Planned maintenance generally does not move the needle much, but there could be issues. It's just kind of like taking your car into the shop. Sometimes you uncover unexpected issues.
Right. Sometimes
how many times have you gotten that call? Oh, hey, Matt. Oh, hey, Patrick. We noticed. And it's like, Don't do this to me.
You didn't realize it, but you also need new brakes and rotors just because you were going in to get new tires. Oh, great. Right. I can hardly wait. No, I understand that completely. Well, Patrick, thanks for your insight so much, as always, as a co-host here. And
great episode here again, Matt.
Agreed.
And if anyone has questions about this, I'm sure we'll hear some of the political opinions. Throw them to Matt. If you have a political disagreement with him, you can route that to Matt's mailbox or both of us. Podcast@gasbuddy.com is our email. You can find Matt McLean on X at Over a Barrel Matt. Of course, I'm Gas Buddy Guy. You can also find our show, Over a Barrel, on X and Facebook. Like, subscribe, follow. Throw us a rating or review. We'd love that as well. If you have any questions, we'd love to tackle them here on our next episode, wouldn't we, Matt?
Absolutely. Always here to answer questions and have a little fun and create a few bloopers probably behind the scenes as well.
There you go.
One day we'll probably show those and it'll be entertaining. All right. Well, that's going to wrap up this edition of Over a Barrel. Thank you so much for joining us. We very much appreciate your time, and we will talk again coming up really soon.